Definitely in that younger age group, it's probably more so about teaching movements and exposing them to different things. I probably have a lot more bigger dealings with, say, ages of like 11, 12 up. And I guess that, 12-year-old to 18 is probably the biggest group that I work with, and I'm pretty structured in my approach in those age groups and how I tackle it. And you definitely need to be mindful at that younger age in terms of the loads that you throw at them. There's so much growing in that age group that needs to be your number one focus.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Reflective Coach podcast with Coach Luca. In this week's episode, I'm delighted to welcome Physio and Athlete Development Manager Antonietta Del Pinto. It was great to speak to Antonietta about physiotherapy, about student loads and working with them in terms of their athletic development, the growth of a player, their well-being, their natural growth, their predicted growth. And it was great to sort of get that take on a physiotherapist side and in terms of strength and conditioning and working with a player and all the certain science side of things where I've had a lot of coaches on, a lot of ex-pros, players, etc. So it was nice to get a physio on and someone who works in that side of things to get their take on how players grow, how they prepare themselves, how they might have a diet plan, how they might need certain nutrition, how they might react to certain nutrition plans or react to certain loads, or the expectation of coaches might be too heavy in terms of the scheduling and periodisation of supporting players, how that might fit in terms of game preparation, individual training, team training, games itself, recovery, the amount of time needed, a player returning from injury too quickly, how players might pick up from injury, and then at grassroots level, how coaches may not really understand the maturation of players in terms of their growth from certain ages and how that might reflect upon how heavy a session may be, or the introduction of static stretching too early rather than dynamic stretching, which is really important, or getting players under sixes to do a lot of hurdles and to do a lot of standing around stretching because that's the way they've done things. And it's just about making sure that coaches have sort of that knowledge and that insight, and to pique that interest into thinking about how you may be overworking players, or how you might be trying to fit too much into a session, or really relating on to what Phil was talking about last week, that ball contact time, and how players must really enjoy it, because as much as you might be working with scholars and then players who might be semi-pro or on a professional circuit or in the academy, then there's going to be a strong curriculum and a strong way of working, but and you might be supported as a coach, but in terms of flipping that into the grassroots and just really piquing that interest, so you're reflecting upon how you may work with your players, how this may look in periodisation, how this may look over a succession of games and training sessions, and how you might start to plan your season, and how last season might look different to this season in terms of your preparation, or how you may go off and speak to physios or S&C coaches or anyone who works in that sort of side of things, and to really start thinking about how you can best support your players, and especially if they're returning from injury, and how to prevent injuries. And it was great to speak to Antonietta about her outlook in terms of then supporting and working with coaches in terms of her own personal experiences and what her expectations may be compared to what the manager may be. So it's very important about that relationship, that synergy, about not trying to return players too quickly or try to put too much expectation on them. But as I was relating it back to a minute ago, what I was talking about with Phil last week was the enjoyment of players. And if players aren't enjoying it and you're forcing too much S&C, or there's too many sessions where you're seeing players literally go into hurdles every week, or the hurdles are out continuously, and it's going to be a very heavy base fitness session and a lot of fitness training as such, whereas players are going to get fit because you're naturally going to give them a ball which they're going to enjoy having. So if you do ball mastery and warm players up that way, and you're teaching them and coaching them different skills and getting a number of touches on the ball, then realistically, naturally over time, they're going to become fit anyway, because they're constantly moving about. You might have short, sharp, intense ball mastery warm-ups. You may return to it in between transitions. You may have players doing it as you're setting something else up or quickly moving it, or if players are quickly having a drinks break, can they run over with the ball, have a quick drink, and then can they do 10 toe taps and then run back in with the ball, for example. It's just little things about getting more touches on the ball, making sure players enjoy it, rather than, right, we're going into a standard fitness component session here, we're going to spend the hour doing this, da 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 da. So unless, you know, you're building it in and it works nicely, and you might be splitting up your sessions, and you might have that gym session or you might have that fitness session, and I've done it with my teams, and it's really fun because they like doing things off the ball, and it is really needed in terms of that fitness at times, and especially at the back end of the season when we've got less on, you know, a bit more time to take away from the ball and just get back to the person and doing a bit more group and social things through that fitness dynamic, and there's no game, so recovery time is good. And it starts to introduce players to that fitness component and working into what we might call gym sessions, etc. But it's all been pre-planned, and we've spoken to the right people to make sure that's been put in place. Whereas I have literally seen a winter training a couple of years ago, and all I saw, and this was winter, was hurdle for 5 or 6 weeks from the team on the 5-side pitch next to ours training, and they were the exact same age group. And it was just hurdles. And there is nothing wrong with that, but it was just every week for 5 weeks in terms of that winter period as well. The players are freezing cold. They don't want to be waiting in lines, or, you know, they don't want to be just spending the hour jogging back and forth, because they're going to come home, or they're going to go to school, they're going to come home, get changed, go out to training, then they're going to come home and they're knackered. And then these players are then going, oh, what did I do tonight? Oh, I did some running back and forth. And these players are 10, 11 years of age, and what they've been looking forward to is getting out and playing football. And if they've been doing that for 5 weeks, then their stimulation of excitement is going to be really low, and therefore they might stop enjoying it, etc. So that could have been balanced up a little bit, and that's just a reflection, and there's no criticism on the coaches themselves, because they're out there in the winter delivering that coaching, and kudos to them. But it was just how it could have been broken up and the players could have been supported more. And this is why it's great to speak to someone who has such a great passion and background in the background of this kind of thing in Antonietta, because she really opens up and really allows us to reflect on how a season may look, and she relates that to her experience in terms of a school-based season, how that might look. She mentioned biometric delivery, loads, younger players, and how the warm-ups may look. The systems that may be out there, we're utilising data to support players, and how this may reflect in terms of that individual training, the components, and what we may introduce into sessions. She talked about players' growth over a period of time, and the type of exposure that players are having. So whether they're having exposure at a younger age, then this is going to benefit them at an older age, because they have that experience around it, and players then might be limited if they're coming in at professional level at a later age. They've had that lack of exposure, but then it's also that exposure in terms of having too much exposure and just having the right amount, which is really important. That key relationship with the coaching team, the manager, having those great relationships to really talk about delaying a player returning. You know, this might be one of your more technical players. You may be in a rush to get them back, but just delaying them will stop them having an injury as quick, and therefore being straight back out already. So it's just about working with those around you and working with the manager, and just having that open conversation and understanding that, and certainly working then with the physio if you are the manager or the lead coach, etc. But there's a lot of takeaways within this session, and it really helped me understand a little bit more about it. You know, as coaches, we might have an understanding of, you know, the different aspects that come into players and coaching. But you know, if you spoke to, you know, some of the managers at top level about whether they really understood the data side of things, and the strength and conditioning, and the physio side, how many of them would actually be able to come back and really relay out all the information at a top level? And this is why then you have physio departments, strength and conditioning, recruitment analysts, and then doctors, and then the medical departments, and how they interlink. And that's because the coach can rely on other departments to do their job, and it may not be like that at grassroots. So therefore, you don't have to specialise in every area. You can have a good understanding of it. I've got a good understanding of this, but I'm not an expert in it, and this is why I wanted to speak to Antonietta and really get her on the podcast, which I'm glad to have her on. But it's just that consideration and reflection to really have. But it was great to have her on. There's so much in this episode to really consider and think about in your own coaching platform and how you structure sessions, etc. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I have. You can find the Reflective Coach podcast on Anchor, Spotify, LinkedIn, YouTube and Twitter. It's at TRC Podcast _ on Twitter. It's the Reflective Coach podcast everywhere else. I'm Anthony_Luca96. This is the Reflective Coach podcast. Drop a like, drop a follow, drop a comment. I've got that completely wrong this week, so I'm sure it's drop a like, drop a follow, leave a comment. It is really appreciated. Leave a subscribe. I hope you can find us across all of our socials and look forward to this week's episode. It's a big thank you from me, Coach Luca.
I'm just having problems trying to link my headphones, so just give me a minute. I don't know why it's not working.
That's right, no worries.
You know what? Let's go no headphones. That's fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. It's just your picture's a little fuzzy. Hopefully that'll try and sort itself out as we get along.
Okay.
How's your day been so far?
It just started, so...
Oh, yes. Sorry, you're early in the morning.
That's all right. All good. We went and got a coffee. Now I'm here. So
what time is it? 7 a.m. did you say?
Yeah, 7.
That's pretty good commitment considering, especially you're on Saturday morning now?
I am Saturday morning. That's right. Mornings are good. I'm not a night person, so early mornings are fine.
Yeah, because I was going to say, when you said, I'm happy to come on 7 o'clock in the morning, I was like, that is pure commitment, to be fair. I was like, I'm happy to do it later. I was like, if you asked me to go at 7, I could struggle probably.
If you would ask me to go 10 p.m, you'd get nothing from me, so...
So do you have anything on after this on a Saturday, or...?
Not at the moment. So I don't have. I don't have any small commitment right now. On a Saturday, our season hasn't, our school season hasn't started yet. So no, not quite. We're just nothing specific. No work related stuff today.
That's right. Then a bit of a relaxed or day, which can have sort of a bit of a breather then.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a hectic couple of weeks. So looking forward to not having too much on.
That's right. This will be me this time next week because I have a week's annual leave next week, and I can't wait because today's just burnt me out. It's been a long week, but today has just sort of finished it.
What are you up to for your leave?
I've just got a day in uni, and I've got nothing planned for the rest of the week. It's sort of left free at the minute.
Nice.
Hoping a couple of things crop up in it, but I'm not trying to over plan it. My best mate runs his own coaching company. He always texts me saying, "Can you work during half terms?" And I'm like, oh, I could, but then I'm like, I'd rather have a bit of a week off.
Yeah, fair enough. Hopefully it's semi-relaxing for you.
Yeah, hopefully. So it's not too bad. So this is a great episode in itself because also you do a lot of, physiotherapy, fitness, components, athletic development, working with athletes in terms of their own plans and looking after themselves. So for me, I'm, a complete blank mind in terms of that. I could say, right, I do a bit of this, bit of that, but I couldn't get to the knowledge that you have. So this is, basically your platform, really. And I'm sort of the novice in this. So it's great because there's so many questions which I could have because, as coaches, we all want and need to have knowledge around different segments such as, the tactical play, the technical, how to develop players, their fitness, looking after them, mental health, and so on. But we're not all experts in every field, and if we were, then we'd be the most sought after manager in the game, I suppose. But that's why we have such an importance because of having other professionals like physiotherapists, athletic development managers, / coaches, S&C coaches, our psychologists, etc. So, when it comes down to working with players in terms of their fitness and components, is there, something that you would typically see coaches do that might be wrong that you have to sort of go and address because they lack that knowledge, or?
I wouldn't say it's something that they are purposely doing, but I think
Yeah.
it's common when they feel like they can't ask questions, or sometimes step back and let people that may have more knowledge in certain fields kind of take that section. So I think a pretty big one is training loads and conditioning and things. That's probably what I find most common. Coaches obviously know a bit about, but feel like they want to take the lead with that when they may not be the best person for it, just in terms of knowledge. And also, I find normally in my roles, I'm always kind of in charge of all things well-being. So there might be things that players have spoken to me about that may give me a bit of a better picture of what they're going through and what a week should look like. And sometimes coaches like to just kind of take that, which is fair. It's their show to run, but sometimes people take a lead in things that could be a little bit more shared.
Absolutely. And do you find then there's a bit of conflict in terms of that? If you get overruled, and it can be that sort of clash at times, is that difficult?
Yeah, if you're in an environment where it's not very shared, then that is. There's definitely been some great coaches that I've worked with that is really open to everyone in the team's opinion, and they're the most successful ones. If I reflect on the most successful seasons I've had, you've been in an environment where everyone kind of gets their say, and the coach can step back at times and lead at times when they need to. But absolutely, if you're in an environment where the manager is the manager, it can be a bit tough at times.
And that's a great concept, because in the back of my mind, I got that Jose Mourinho, Eva Canero situation many years ago. She's obviously the head doctor at the time, very highly qualified in terms of everything to do around that and about the player injury. And he's screaming at her, going, "No, no, no, deal with it this way." And although he might be a fitness coach and have that background, essentially she is the more qualified one in that situation. And life isn't always about being the most qualified, but in that situation, if I was the manager, I don't think I'd be arguing with my doctor about that situation. So if I had a fitness coach or someone in charge of it in my team and they sort of said to me, "All right, this is it," then I would accept that at face value. But if I wasn't and overruling it, and at times you want to rush players back in, it can be really detrimental, because you rush them back in, i.e. Eden Hazard, for example, and then they're out injured for a longer period of time.
Yeah, I think it also comes down to your relationship with the coach. So if you're in a new environment, if you haven't had those conversations, sat down and let your coach know that you're on the same page and you're there to try and help them and do what's best for the players, then I think those situations can happen. I think missing that key at the beginning is kind of sets up your season. So I wonder if those small chats didn't happen. But yeah, end of the day, a situation like that is always going to be the toughest thing to deal with, because it always does kind of come back on you if you're working in the medical team, when there is injuries and things. But probably the steps to what led it were probably not exactly in your control.
Of course, and it can be difficult then when it is outside of that control, and when there are so many factors playing into it. But also, you work with players, as young as 7 that I saw through your experience. What age do you work up to?
Age-wise?
Yeah.
Yeah, so currently in my school role, I guess like finishing school, so they're hitting maybe 17, 18.
Right. And in terms of that then, when you work with, say, like younger players compared to older, when you look at a younger player, is it more about sustaining their fitness or the components that might affect injuries when they are 18 at a younger age? And you have to look at that a little bit more, because obviously if they're starting at 6, 7, and then they're having a schools program, then they might have a county program, then academy club and so on. There is a lot of training just over, say, in 1 year. And if you take in consideration between 7 and 18, that's an 11-year block where that is quite heavy on terms of their, physicality and, what might not be sustainable on their legs, etc. And when you are working with them when they're younger, do you have to sort of slow them down, or is it more accelerate when they're younger in terms of trying to get fit and develop muscles in their body? Is there a certain way of looking at that, or?
Definitely in that younger age group, it's probably more so about teaching movements and exposing them to different things. I probably have a lot more kind of bigger dealings with, say, ages of like 11, 12 up. And I guess that, 12-year-old to 18 is probably the biggest group that I work with, and I am pretty structured in my approach in those age groups and how I tackle it. And you definitely need to be mindful at that younger age in terms of the loads that you throw at them. There's so much growing in that age group that needs to be your number one focus. And there's a few ways you can kind of tackle it. You can measure heights and weights and things like that if you are concerned. But I guess on a bit of a global scale, it is about pulling them back at that age. And then having a little bit more closer eye when they do get a bit older in terms of what you can throw at them.
Of course, it can be difficult because obviously then if the player is wanting to play so much and get those loads up and the parents are then going right 1-to-1, then you might have a fitness training plan. It's just because in the back of my mind I've done a lot of grassroots coaching, so you see a lot of pushy parents obviously trying to get kids into the academy, get them fitter. And there was one parent, we were working under 10s, so he was about 9, 10. And he was training 5 days a week. So he had 4 days of football training across 3 different teams. Then he would have fitness training, and then he would play his game on the Saturday, on the Sunday, and then he might do something on Saturday. So it was minimum 5 training sessions plus a game, and then if not, something on Saturday. So you could have anywhere between 5 and 7. I was like, right, so he's got one fitness session in there, which is literally working with a fitness coach where he is beasting this 9, 10-year-old, because I've seen the session itself. And I'm like, this surely can't be healthy for the player. Okay, as much as it is, their fitness is good and they are staying fit, especially if they might not have the best diet, etc., or they're out doing lots of running. But I'm like, right, that must have such an adverse effect, especially if they're doing it all year round, for example.
Yeah, I think, something that's probably not supported by evidence, but just something I see. Kids are so resilient. They can handle everything you throw at them. So if a kid is breaking down, then, the loads that they're doing must be incredibly, incredibly big. And I think at that age group, that's probably what I see. Exactly the example you've given. These kids are doing these huge training loads just because they can handle it. They'll never report being sore. Maybe a bit tired is the only clue you're going to get if you're getting too much from your young athlete. Also in that age group, I find it might be a little bit different in Australia, but kids are normally doing more than one sport at that age. So they've probably got a key sport that they're really good at, but they are also either pick something else at school or, doing something outside. And that's probably where problems occur because, you may know all their football training, but you don't know the other sports that they're training. And that's probably a little bit of education to parents in terms of, have you looked at their whole week in terms of how much they're doing? And because kids are resilient, they get away with it. But I definitely think sometimes there's so many cases where they're definitely doing a little bit too much over a week.
Absolutely, I completely agree because that is quite a lot to put on a kid, especially just mentally itself, taken away from just the physicality, and that's obviously something that works hand in hand in terms of when you work with them. There is that big mental side of the game, how they would return from rehabilitation or beyond that process, or how they may be affected by a long-term injury, or if they're not used to having injuries, then one happens to break down their way of playing or their season. It can be game over for them. But when you work with sort of young players and say maybe grassroots coaches or work with grassroots clubs, is there a certain way that you might collect data or have a system at just analysing a way to look at players just to give them more support, for example?
Yeah, grassroots is really hard. I think you don't have that technology to rely on, and I don't think that's the only thing you can use. But sometimes with younger athletes, they're not super honest in how they're feeling. So some data can help in terms of if you've got GPS or something that numbers don't really lie. I think the easiest way I've kind of done it with grassroots is getting to know the players, because you'll pick up really subtle things when you see them over multiple days of the week kind of process. As I said, like a report being tired, that's a big one. If you're getting that from a youth athlete, then something is likely quite up, or they're really not doing the basics right, or they're not eating, or they're not sleeping. Also trying to educate your coaches in terms of, can I get as much training plan from you as possible? So then I can have a bit of a gauge of at least what to expect throughout a week. So if you do need to adjust someone's training load, you've got an idea of a picture of what's happening throughout the week. But that can be tough in grassroots if that coach themselves are also, this is their second job, this is their third job. So how much preparation are they doing? But I like to try and have those conversations early and see if you can at least get some kind of picture of what a week can go by, because, sometimes kids aren't super honest, so you've got to pick up really small things.
I think that's really helpful, especially, to have that conversation with the player, because I'm just trying to approach this from a grassroots background in terms of, those who don't have the resources, as we say, those who lack that maybe qualification or knowledge and expertise, those who might not have the resource or the depth to sort of go into it, those who might not be comfortable in doing it, and just sort of see, from working with coaches that I've been around or how they've delivered sessions or what I might typically see grassroots coaches do now. And I think, it's a great resource to sort of share this out there, especially with those that I'm connected with, because, if I wouldn't go into a team and go, right, this is my fitness plan for the players, because I have absolutely no idea of, okay, I might go, right, I want them to be fit, but I might not put on a running session next week. I might, right, go, how could I implement this within a technical session and do maybe ball mastery, and then it's going to get their outcomes in terms of the fitness that way, rather than lapping them for an hour and a half, for example. And it's just that consideration, for example. But what you say when you have various sports, and which is good because it does tap into having that conversation with the player and having that honesty with them. Do you think, although problems may occur from playing those other sports, it can help in other ways? So, swimming unlocks muscles in other ways which you might not get in football. Do you think by doing other sports it does complement in a way and this can be beneficial, or would you say more to sort of focus on one and do a bit of something else alongside it?
Yeah, I think it comes back to that debate all over the internet about early specialisation. Is that detrimental for our youth athletes, or is it beneficial? And I think I probably sit on the camp that exposing them to different sports is really positive. I think you're always going to find those youth athletes that are really gifted at one sport. Sometimes you just from a young age they're going to be able to be really good at this, or they're going to be really fast, and you don't want to stop that. You don't want to stop that from happening. But when they are in this real developmental age, I think it's crucial in terms of exposing to different sports. And I think to find what their niche is and what their interest is, because I think I've found that sometimes kids can really be really good at a sport, but they may not actually enjoy it. They just enjoy it because they're good at it. And I think that's something to consider. Maybe they haven't been exposed to the actual sport that is going to be their number one sport. But I think even more important, on an injury prevention level, if you're not exposing them to different sports at a young age, it's going to be harder as they get older. Like, taking away from football, if you think of what I've seen before is young athletes say that are really good runners and they just do track and field, really just focus on straight line running, multiple times a week. And then maybe at school or something, they get thrown into a game or a team sport, and they've never been exposed to change of direction or contact in any way. And I feel if they're not exposed at least at some stage, and it doesn't need to be as equal part of throughout the week to what their normal sport is, I think it's crucial to at least get some exposure to then be resilient at that. Otherwise, they kind of miss that. So I think. Yeah, I sit on the camp that you should expose to a few different things, but I'm not going to stop someone that's unreal at their sport just because I want them to do something else.
And it's great that you say that, because you might see things when you work with the different ages between 7 and 18. You might work with that age group, say 16 and 18s, where you can observe and see players who are lacking or have lacked the opportunity where they have not been in other sports, and when they're awkward when they're on the pitch because they can't do certain movements quickly because they've never been exposed to it. So for me, I was never very quick at acceleration. I was terrible. I'm honestly one of the slowest players, and I hate to admit that. But I was never, I was never a runner. I was never exposed to various sports where I might do a lot of running. And then when I sort of get into the game, I'm sort of played in a box-to-box, but there's no way I could sustain that over a 90-minute period. When you sort of work with players on that category and when they haven't been exposed to sports, it's sort of, you have to then go back to go, right, we have to do things which you should have done at 7 or 8 to sort of re-implement that at a later age.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I've introduced at St Andrews is sometimes you can expose them in the gym, so in a bit of like taking them off the field and in a bit of a gym setting, because then you can expose them to different things. So I think you've got those young athletes that just like one sport, just do one sport. That can be somewhere where
Okay.
are we back?
Yes, I'm not sure what's happened there. It sort of kept freezing. That's right. You okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
Fab. Yeah, so it was just back to that point, obviously, when you're observing players when obviously they're at an older age and they might be that 16 to 18 and sort of then going back to re-implement things that they should have done. It's then how we go back and do that.
Yeah, so something that I've introduced at St Andrews is I've basically stripped back in terms of and rewritten our development programs in the gym. And I think that can be a space where you can expose these young athletes to those different stimuluses that may not happen outside the gym. I think that can be good for those young players that just play one sport and that's just what they do throughout the week. So they may not get exposed to some other elements. So just in those programs, I just make sure that some kind of jump land technique is in there, some kind of change direction skill is in there, different movement patterns are in there to get a bit of exposure there. And I think also that's probably where I can notice the most if a student has not been exposed to multiple different things. You can see some basic movements, movement patterns that they just can't, they don't get it. They just have, and it's just because they haven't been exposed. And you can find that in that space. You can realize it. You can kind of jump on it a little bit more. So I think that's one place that you can help kind of expose different things. At a school setting, I think that would be a bit harder if you're picking this up, say in a team environment where you are just there for one sport.
And an interesting concept in terms of that is, obviously when players have that exposure and you've created that space when they are in the gym, you might go, right, you're lacking that, and where you have seen that. Obviously, when there becomes a lot of talent ID, and this might not be in at the school or it might be around it, obviously a lot of conditions and areas are analysed when it comes to players. So, obviously a lot of technical and a bit of their tactical, and we look at their psychosocial, and sometimes you might take in consideration these fitness components. But if you were, you typically asked then to go to talent ID and give comments in terms of this area. So you might look at little Johnny and go, right, he's lacking this athletic ability compared to little Joey over here, who might be, a more rounded player in terms of his athletic development. Do you sort of have an input when it comes to talent IDing?
Coaches reach out to me when they spot these things that they want me to work on specific athletes with. So that happens a bit. I think throughout the year, I am going to appear more at teams at our sport on the weekend of all the different teams, and I will have a bit more of a role there. But I've already worked where I'm working for the last few years, and more of a referral from coaches and teachers and things are probably a bit more of what I see. But I think I will move more to kind of help that talent ID space a little bit as the year progresses.
And it's interesting when we sort of look at talent ID, because obviously it's still growing for me, and there's so many concepts that we might not consider or look at. And some coaches can be really harsh, look at a player and go no instantly, and others go, right, do you know what, I might take a punt on this player, for example, and then we can really invest that time. And even if they are lacking this rounded skill development, we can really put in the extra time, and it might be a longer process, and obviously allocation of more resources, more budget thrown at it because they need the hours, paid coaches, etc. But it's great when clubs and other coaches sort of identify players who have that potential. And one player that sticks out in my mind, for example, is the likes of Harry Kane and David Beckham. Actually, Beckham was told that he would be too small to be a footballer, and then obviously was one of the best English footballers ever, for example. And it's really interesting when we look at the contrast of the data collected, and we're analysing how tall players may be, their fitness, their every sort of detail we can get on a player, and then we might determine that we're going to write them off because they might not reach the expectations that we need, for example, and it can really throw a lot of players under the bus in that reality. So is it difficult then when you are an athletic development manager or working in that background to go, oh right, it's easy to write players off, or we are quite data heavy right now in the world. Sometimes the data doesn't always show the real picture. Is that sort of difficult to work in and write players off, or is it more that you might fight a corner for them?
Yeah, talent ID is super tough. I mean, you've got one session to just say this person's in and this person's out. It's a tough spot to be in. But I think what some coaches may not understand is young athletes can get can pick up new skills really quickly. They're like a sponge, you know what I mean? So if they just need to get better at one thing and you focus on one thing, as soon as they get it, they just get it. So I think they probably coaches need to focus a little bit more on those players that are just, in their eyes, not good enough, because they're the players that are probably going to be the easiest to move up to the next step, because, youth athletes, they just need a bit of repetition. They just need to kind of just break it down and focus on this one skill. And not every time, some of course not every time, but a large percentage of the time, they just need a bit of repetition. They just need a little bit of a helping hand on one skill. They probably haven't been stopped and approached and be like, you just need to work on this one thing. But it's definitely an age group where as soon as you add in a bit of repetition, or you just need to use a cue that they understand, once they get it, they'll get it, and they'll get it for the next 5 years, and they'll just get better at it. So, yes, talent ID is very tough, and I think a little bit, I think if you've got your A squad in terms of these are the squad I've picked, you probably need to look into that B squad or address that B squad, because they'll turn into your A squad pretty quickly if you do the right things.
And that's such a great concept and sort of a great takeaway, which it's great to just have within itself there, and talking about focusing on that one skill and that repetition, which can be really beneficial, because as coaches we might go, right, I've got this session plan this week, that session plan next week, the one the week after, and I'm like, right, okay, you've done this session plan, you've organised 3 weeks worth of a program, But over the 3 weeks, where is the repetition or recollection that we build upon, the building blocks? Because you're not essentially doing that. You sort of done one thing, jump straight to the other. I'm like, right, there's no real consistency there for the player, or no current theme that runs across. Your session might be different every week, but then there's that theme sort of stops 1 week and then doesn't return. We needed to run across all 3 weeks, and then, your session can still be different every week. We just need that theme to be consistent then.
Yeah, and it comes down to what you asked me in the beginning. Communication and relationship with coach is key. Yeah, I mean, if you can't have those conversations to just point out the fact, maybe we haven't ticked multiple different exposures, multiple different skills in a week, and your coach is not open to that feedback, then you're probably not going to get the most out of your team. But I think that's all that really needs to happen there. You know what I mean? Someone needs to step back and just have a look at the week, and it may not be my position, or maybe someone else's position in the team, to just break down what their week looks like and look at what they've ticked off. Are we just really working on one thing only? Are we not really, working on multiple different things? And if not, let's just address it. Could we do this better next week? Should we focus on other things, or is this just part of your game plan? You just want to improve this one thing, then okay, but you may not get the best out of your squad, especially in this young age group where exposure is key.
Absolutely. And when it comes then, say for an example, a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, you might have a 7-year-old starting out on their journey, and then a 9-year-old who might have had 2-3 years in. Do you find it easier sort of to go, right, there's a 7-year-old, I got a blank template, here you go for the next 5 years, for example? Or is it easier sort of to get in with a 9-year-old who's been doing it a couple of years to address what you might or might not have been doing, and then go, right, let's do this and let's do that?
I think this young age group, both will be really easy. I think when they get older, that's when you get trouble. Well, not trouble, but it's definitely hard to change habits and things. Like when I'm working in a professional setup, and that older age groups, that's definitely hard to teach new skills and change minds and change habits and things like that. But I think at the younger ages, I've seen both be pretty fine to work with. 7 to 9, both similar outcomes, I would say.
And it's great that you touch on habits there, and that sort of concept. What are typical bad habits that you might see generically across? Say you worked with 100 athletes in the last month. Is there a typical set of bad habits you would tend to see?
You can pick it up pretty quick in a conversation, or when they say, "I just do this," and you're like, "Okay, I'm just trying to teach you something new." So I think you can notice that in the rehab space, if you do need to kind of reintroduce some movement patterns and things, and it's just, "Oh, I've always do it like this," and you're like, "Yeah, but I've just got to teach you a different way." "Oh, no, I just do it like this." So it can be exposed then. I think it can be exposed if you're taking certain parts of training that they haven't done before, like if you're doing some speed work or something before, where you're teaching them a drill that they haven't done before, and you can see the athletes that are willing to listen and try and understand what you're trying to teach them, or you can just see the athletes that are just doing enough that they're not going to get pointed out that they're not doing the drill. So I think when you add change or something new, that's when you see it. And if some people are stuck in habits and not willing to learn, then that can be tough. But I also think kind of education is a big one here. As soon as you explain to someone why you're doing it, and what it leads to in bigger pictures, they tend to get a bit more on board. And I think, in this youth space, you just need to give them an example that they understand. So, if you're teaching a drill that essentially it's, speed mechanics or something, they don't want to use those words, they're not going to understand those words. But if you just, talk their language and say, this is going to get you faster, okay, they're suddenly on board in terms of, okay, I should work on this because, I want to get faster. So educating, speeding their language, they can help. But you can definitely find habits from all ages if they're a little bit stuck in it.
Absolutely. And it's great that we talk, again, you relate back to communication and just having those sort of, conversation with the players, just to understand what might be a good habit, a bad habit, how they can address things. And it's great that you say how you could frame something in a certain way with a question, because a lot of coaches will work players, but they might not throw questions out there, or they might throw closed-end questions, or we don't build upon our questioning techniques, and that's something that I'm really key on in terms of when working with players, and it's something that I've taken away from education and try to apply it more in coaching, and try to get players to problem solve, critically analyze, and try to give them the education and try and pull that out rather than giving them the answers. So it's great that you talk about that in terms of how you can address those fitness components or bad habits, or how we can talk to them about things that they do and the way that they approach things. And it's not something that every coach does, or it might not be part of their key skill set, and it's something that they can develop. But questioning techniques for me is really important. And it's great that it can really help build upon the outcomes that we're looking for if we're addressing or reviewing a player in terms of how we can support them.
Yeah, and I think I can think of an example that I intervened on a problem that was getting a little bit out of control pretty quickly. I was in a youth football space a few years ago, and they were playing very early games, but so early in the morning, in a pretty hot part of our season, and it was the younger age groups, maybe 14, 15. And 3 or 4 weeks in a row, I'd have a player coming off after 10 minutes feeling really faint, and feeling like they're going to pass out. And quick conversations were, have you eaten before your game? Something so basic. Oh, but it's so early. I can't handle food so early in the morning. And it was just not until I kind of addressed in terms of, giving them options, speaking their language to kind of address, okay, you may not be able to handle this type of food, but have you tried this? And giving them options, and speaking to them, speaking to parents, and not just take a blanket, I can't handle food in the morning. Okay, let's try different food groups. Let's get you speaking to a dietitian. Let's fix this problem, because it was becoming a pretty big problem pretty quickly, when players could just handle 10 minutes of a game just simply because they felt like they didn't have time to eat, or they didn't feel like they could handle things. And, that kind of led to a whole squad kind of education lesson. But I think if I didn't one-on-one speak to that player in terms of giving them multiple options that suit them, or giving them, the right person to speak to address, giving them options, I think it was becoming a problem pretty quickly, but was a pretty simple fix. And it was just through education, which I think is just, to me, my biggest tool I can provide is education. And just as soon as they understand it and get exposed to it, it's easy to get a good outcome.
And it's great that we continue to talk about education, because a lot of coaches, you might go and see the physiotherapist, or go and see the S&C coach, or just get down to that department, and you might see a coach and they go, right, this is what you need to do, off you go. And they don't really educate the player on it. They might just tick their boxes and do what they need as a coach. And you will have coaches and professionals like that, and it is difficult, but they might be really good at going, right, this is your plan, you need to do this, but they don't really help in terms of that education. And education for players, especially young players, in the back of my mind, is so important, because then they can take ownership and go, right, I'm not entirely sure on this, but if I know that I can work on this and do this, and then create a good habit, and then work with the S&C coach in this department, and they can refine things in terms of what I need to approach, I think that's really beneficial for them. And giving them education, when you say, for a player, they might not go, all right, I haven't had food, or food isn't important, or I don't eat in the morning, or training's really early and I've been dragged out of bed, etc. Just having that little thing, all right, get up a little bit earlier, or could you just eat this in the car on the way there? Also, you see coaches pull out Jaffa cakes and oranges, but if a player was running late, for example, or they were just someone who struggled with early mornings and might have to be dragged out of bed to get the training, is there anything else that you would say, right, this is a set of food to sort of eat in the car on the way to training? Or
Yeah, preparation is key with an example like that. That was so this particular squad, that was I just basically ran a little education lecture on them, and that's what it was. So it was just giving them foods that will give them what they need, and it's just sometimes with this population, it was thinking it's way too hard, I don't have the time, but it actually, if you know what you're looking for in the supermarket, you can actually buy some things that are so easy to chuck in your bag that, this food you eat when you wake up, and this is what you eat when you get to the ground. They'll tick your box, and if you don't need to go cook something, you don't need to go prepare something. So yeah, being really prepared fixes that, but it's just, again, educating them on how easy it can be. But I think that also kind of comes down to what you were saying in terms of like staying in your lane. So I think sometimes in these team environments, if you've got multiple people you can fall on, so physio, S&C, head coach, assistant coach, things like that, it's good to combine your skill set and then know the best person to speak to. So, even if it was something that was, quite injury specific, but if I wasn't the best person with the best knowledge to address it, if you're in a team environment where you're okay to be open with each other and know your skill set, it's good to be able to actually step back and go, I'm, glad you've told me, but this person is going to help you out. And it's just being able to do that. Like, you just need to realize you're in a team, and you all want to get the best result out of your player. And maybe you don't know all the answers, but just admitting that I might not know the answer, but this person can.
And it's great that you say work as a team, and we might not all have the answers. So if I came to you and said, right, I want to do a session with a player, it's going to be technical, but I would like the outcomes of fitness to be focused upon within the session. And I said, right, I've got a group of say 15 players, I've got an hour. How would you typically set up a session so that it would be delivered to try and get these fitness outcomes out?
Yeah, I guess, speaking with coaches and combining, and getting a session created together is always going to work the best. I can think of an example where I worked in football for like 5 years in a row, and then I got thrown into an AFL sport, so Australian football. I'm sure if you know that sport, but very, very different to what I was exposed to, and I've never played it before or seen a lot of it. And there was a lot of learning for me in that season. And that's just when I relied on other members of the team to help me create these sessions. Obviously head coach is pretty busy, but you've got multiple other people in the team. You can speak to players, you can speak to assistant coaches, even like your manager. Your manager's always the person that watches the most sport or has been involved in the sport for so long. So even conversations with them, just trying to understand the game a little bit better and understand what drills are going to be key for them. And then I can just then use my conditioning knowledge and you create something through there. But it's got to be collaborative. If you're not an expert in that field, just be willing to collaborate and speak to others and combine skills.
And that's what it's all about. It comes down to that collaboration and utilising on the other skills that they have. And, something as basic as a warm-up, making sure that is dynamic rather than static, or having that combination can really work. And I know when I first started out in a game, or looking back when I was a young player, it was a lot of static, stand in a circle, repeat the stretches of the middle player. Someone else is going to come in and then do your stretching, and then you might just do like a little jog, and then you might be running around, drop, touch the floor, back up. And now it's sort of a lot more dynamic. So it's the quick movements, the quick feet in and out of cones. You might have a lot more technical terms when it comes to this, but we sort of players are doing high knees, they're doing heel flicks. They might do a bit of a shoulder badge and a sprint. They might lie down and get up really quickly for acceleration. And that's something that we started to look at. But would you say that would be a good warm-up, or how would you typically deliver a warm-up, say, for a group of players and then allow the game to run with the coaches?
Yeah, you know what? I think the internet can be super helpful, but can also be really harmful in these situations as well. But there's so much out there now in terms of dynamic warm-ups. There's been huge studies out there. The FIFA 11 Plus is now something you can really easily Google, which is, a dynamic warm-up program that, was backed by a lot of research, and then FIFA jumped on board and spread the message. So I think there's a lot of good stuff out in the internet that you can find, but also can be a bit of a problem if people have found something on the internet and it hasn't been written by a very good source. But yeah, I think as you mentioned, you need to be dynamic. So I think some of the things you were listing there, you're a pretty fantastic place to start. I mean, static stretches are okay, but they can't be the only thing in a warm-up. They need to be dynamic. So one thing I like to do, especially if I'm going to introduce a new warm-up, is either at the beginning or right at the end. You give the player, okay, you've got 3 minutes to do whatever stretch you want, and then they get a bit of control, and they then get to do, oh, well, what works for me is this, and I still get to do it. So meeting people halfway, that can really, really work. So I think stretches wise, that's a good place to start. I think your runs and things, they need to be exposed to a bit of different speed. I've seen warm-ups where they don't address what's about to happen in the game, and that just comes down to speed and depends what space you have. Are you really, restricted to a 30-meter area? But don't let that stop you. You can still expose them to things, but sometimes I've definitely seen warm-ups that involve a bit of jogging, which is unreal. Pick that step, but they don't expose them to any speed. And if that's the last thing they're doing, and then you put them on the field and the whistle goes and they've got a sprint, sometimes may not work well. So I think runs need to be exposed to a level of speed. They need to be exposed to a little bit of acceleration. If you've got the space, a little bit of change of direction is fantastic. And then I think the most researched thing in terms of a warm-up, in terms of decreasing injury rates, is exposing to some kind of jump land plyometric exercise there. People think it takes up too much time, but you can knock it off in 3 minutes and you can get 20 jump lands in that time. And it appears in the research that that's the number one thing that is going to decrease injury rates. So they're probably my keys in terms of chucking in a warm-up. That can really be done pretty quickly. So I think even the FIFA 11 Plus can be completed in like 14 minutes or something like that. And that's ticking every single box, Imagine if you just ticked 80% of those boxes and you can probably get it done in 10 minutes. So it's not hard, but people sometimes try to overcomplicate it.
And sometimes overcomplicating it isn't good, because we might want to get these buzz terms out. We might want to tick all our boxes, and sometimes it can be too much. Whereas we could be pressed for time or have that limited space, and sometimes just adjusting it and going, right, we can do a bit of this or a bit of that could really work, or sometimes it might not work. But on the back of that, something that's cropped up in my mind that I was speaking to a coach about is. For his main job, he's actually a salesman, so he sells a lot of medical devices to hospitals and stuff. So he gets to work with a lot of different people in different areas. And he was working with a doctor who was working with Sports Wales and Sport England, and he was saying how important call downs are.
Yeah, I think that can be sometimes a bit of a culture in some sports and not so much a culture in other sports. I've seen it quite a bit in football. I've definitely, not seen it in the rugby codes and things. So I think is a bit of a sport culture thing. Again, I think that's something that I've seen just overcomplicated so many times when it really doesn't need to be, and it doesn't need to go for as long as people think it needs to be. And I think cooldowns can work for some players more than others, and they can tell you. A pretty quick conversation is, when you jump in the car and you get home, are you feeling really stiff and sore? Well, yeah, they're probably the ones that need a cool down. Or they maybe just need to spend a little bit longer on a cool down, as opposed to some players who say, oh, I'm fine, I can actually handle it pretty well, or my drive's only 5 minutes from training. Well, they're probably not people that need to focus it as much. But again, don't overcomplicate it. It doesn't need to take more than 10 minutes or, something slow is the key there. That's probably where your static stretches are going to be a whole lot more beneficial for them. You're just there to really slow the heart rate down and move. So, slow runs or a slow walk, fantastic. Add a little bit of static stretching in there, great. You can be a little bit dynamic with them, walking line, nice and slow, can be a real easy one. And again, you can teach. So, you can teach your squad what the cool down is. And it can be just like 5 things that they do, but they do it together as a squad. It's good to get the captain involved there. That can be a real easy one if you don't have, a physio or SSC on hand. It's simple. Just delegate to someone else. And that's when a captain can be really good. Also in warm-ups, that's another one where you can involve your captain. They definitely feel like they're stepping up in a leadership role, which they are. But don't overcomplicate. You don't need someone to run it. You just need to learn it, be taught from someone, and then someone else can deliver it.
I love that. I love that you say involve the captain or delegate and how they can deliver it, because it doesn't have to be overly complicated, and it's something that is a real importance. And in the back of my mind there, I'm already thinking about Sunday. And even though I've had an importance previously in my last team where we had call downs, I haven't really thought about it much this year, because I haven't had that coach in my ear going, right, we should do this, we should do that, in terms of when it comes to the fitness, because he doesn't have that sort of background, and the sort of coach is changing that for me. So it's just a reminder that I could do that. And you sort of forget little things as your focus drives elsewhere. And as a manager, as you say, you can't cover everything. And when you have such limited resources, you sort of forget about little things which can be key components. And just thinking about it there, when a player comes off the back of a 90-minute game and their heart rate is racing, I'm just thinking ahead of Sunday already is, these players could be doing a slight cool down where they are having that light jog, and it can even distress them, because no matter how much it's helped in a game, if they're out in a light jog, they've got the fresh air still out there, and that's a component of helping with the brain, and those breathing exercises. Just it also helps their mental side as well naturally.
Yeah, and I think that helps when you make it routine. So if you set it from the beginning of the season, that what we're going to do this year is we're going to do our warm up. We're also going to learn this cool down. It can really help on those games where there have not been good games, where there've been bad losses, and you need to be together as a squad. If you've got to do this at the end of the game, doesn't matter if you win or you lose. You have 5 minutes where you're with the squad. It can be really helpful in these cases where maybe an individual player didn't have a good game, or as a squad they lost, something like that. As you said, it can really help that mental side of it. And I think sports psychology is becoming bigger and bigger, but it is something that needs to be looked at, because I think, we're starting younger. Our competitions at a younger age are a lot more competitive than, say, they were 10 years ago. And are we working on this mental side of things? Yes, no, sometimes. But a cool down is a good example. You're getting the squad together, so you can have small conversations between players, which can be great. It can also just be, getting everyone together for 5 minutes can really help. And then again, the physical side of things, getting a bit of relaxation in, calming down the heart rate, working on breathing. They're all strategies that can really help in the mental side of things, and it's an easy way to tick it off if it becomes routine.
And it's great that we sort of talk about routines, and that's another key takeaway and component for consideration for coaches, when they can sort of go, right, I can build this in and I can do that. But one thing that keeps cropping up is that has a natural and ongoing debate: bleep testing. Where does bleep testing fit in for you?
Yeah, look, do I think it's the most necessary thing? Not always. I think if you're going to introduce a test, then you better be using the results. So I think that's how I decide if I'm going to use it. Or if someone asks me the question, should I introduce some kind of fitness test or something like that? Well, yes, only if you're going to use the results. What's your plan with these results? Are you going to retest? How far away are you going to retest? What are you going to do with those results? Can you interpret them? What are you going to do with them? So some cases they're important. If you've got someone on your team that is going to use the results, knows what to look out for and all that kind of stuff, cool, unreal, I'm a big fan of them. But if you're not going to use anything with the results, no. It sounds impressive that you've introduced some tests and day one is going to be this, but if you're not using it, it probably isn't super necessary.
And when you are saying that bleep testing the results, you might retest, and how you're going to use that sort of data and the outcomes in terms of the analyst, the way you analyze it. So say you were to deliver a bleep test, say tomorrow, when would be the next period to sort of deliver that again, for example?
Yeah, it can be your season and your all your preseason structure can be a bit guided through there. If you've got a really short preseason compared to if you've got maybe some holidays and things. So sometimes in Australia it's at the end of the year, so you train for 3 weeks and then Christmas, New Year's happens and then you go again. So I think you need to plan specifically in terms of your timing. So if you're going to do a break, probably not doing it around that. But if you've got just a set 6-8 week preseason and nothing in between, there's definitely no point in retesting early, and it depends if you're talking about a fitness test. If you're not specifically working on fitness, for the first 4 or 6 weeks, then you can't expect the result to increase. So don't test maybe until right before the preseason ends. But I would be saying at a minimum, maybe 6 weeks for me. I don't like to do it any earlier.
And when you are delivering a bleep test and you are looking for results, what is, the basis or the objective of a bleep test?
Yeah, I think it can be what a baseline is, what a baseline is for that athlete. And it can also kind of help if you don't know too much about your squad, about what they've done before coming into this preseason. Were they playing in small local comps or something straight beforehand so their fitness is already up? Or did they come off a big break? Did they actually take a proper off season with nothing on? So it can be a good baseline to where that athlete is at. It can be a baseline on what their fitness is. And I guess, the only time I want to use a fitness test like that is if I'm going to then use the results to program conditioning. So it's a good way to then make it specific to each athlete, or, in the bigger squads, at least into positions. Forward and back will probably have different results, but they'll probably be similar. There'll be, a group of faster players and a group of players that maybe that aren't as fast or aren't as aerobically conditioned. But I use it if I'm going to then use either one retest or to use it to program really specific conditioning.
And that's, great sort of concepts and considerations to take away. And I'm just thinking now, if you've got, say, a 4-11v11 pitch, or you're working in a quarter space on half of that, would you say, players would get more fitness on the hour if they were working on 11v11 or working in the quarter space? So they might do the same session and they might expand it on the 11v11, or they might compress it into the quarter space. What would you say would typically, over an hour, who would get the more fitness in terms of that hour?
Yeah, I think it's slightly different in terms of the type of fitness you're going to expose them to. So typically the bigger spaces, you're going to get that, a bigger overall total distance. So they're going to cover more kilometers, but it's not going to be as fast. When you constrain the space, that's when you see a lot more acceleration. It's at a faster pace. So in terms of the type of conditioning, the bigger pitch will aerobically improve their fitness. Their smaller pitch, increases their anaerobic system. So, their speed, their ability to do repeated sprints and things like that. So, exposing both is probably super specific for football. In terms of bang for buck type thing, then, you can go the smaller states, because they're going to be working harder and faster in that time, as opposed to just ticking off bigger kilometers. You've got, typically more players on the field. You've got to run longer distances, but it's normally slow. Normally slow runs. It's kind of long and slow as opposed to short and fast. So I think both have its benefits, but you could be pretty strategic and in terms of you doing those shorter pitches, because the intensity is going to be high, just need to adjust your minutes per drill.
And it's great that you sort of talk about, the intensity and what the outcomes are, and, the benefits of having both and how that might fit in terms of a strategic plan. And I know when we had a new academy manager come in at a professional football club that I was working at, he moved all of our training from 11-side pitches on to smaller 5-a-side, 7-a-side, because he wanted more contact, quicker repetitions, more touches for the players, quicker reaction times, and all of this. So obviously when you come to look at what the different outcomes are per, the 11v11 pitch compared to a smaller size pitch, now they're still playing on 5v5, 7v7 in terms of training, and then they might have their game on a Sunday which is on 11-a-side or a bigger pitch. Now obviously when it comes down to those different outcomes, and it might just be a 11-a-side pitch every Sunday, and it's all, smaller side training in a week, is that sort of detrimental in terms of how, they're collating and reviewing the results, because they are having that sort of breakup between big and small, but they're not having so much of the big as much as they're having the small, and therefore they're not collecting as much results that might complement as much as the data that's being shown by working on the smaller?
Yeah, I think in that younger population is probably where it is a little bit more important to expose to both sizes. Just even it can be as simple as kind of understanding the game plan and your position and things. For these younger athletes, they need to kind of imagine it on a bigger field, and they're probably ones that really need to actually experience it. That step in between may be a little bit too hard for them. In terms of just kind of in an athletic sense, yeah, probably not super ideal in terms of all your data is on a really small space. It can then be hard to interpret the game data as well. That's probably where you need to be, if you've got it, comparing it to the previous seasons and the previous years, just to kind of see, is your training addressing what we need for the game? And you probably won't know that until you at least maybe have a few games worth of data, or if you can get the data from the previous season. It's just going to be different. It's going to be high intensity. You probably then need someone kind of overlooking in terms of, with a training load perspective, are we, exposing them to too much acceleration? Are we at chances of hamstring, soft tissue tears, that kind of thing? Because that's probably the biggest difference in these smaller spaces. So you probably just need to monitor a little bit more closely. That they're probably when wellness questions can probably need to be used. Again, younger athletes can be hard if they've never done it before. They're not used to reporting it, but it can be as simple as, you can make that, again, not complicated. A few questions, just chat with players. Are you sore? Are all the players reporting only sore in a certain area? Or then, okay, that's probably we need to look at training loads there.
And that's great that, again, you talk about the way that players communicate, how they might have to be honest or where they're not honest, and talking about their loads, their work rate, how they might approach things, and the considerations that they might or could have within their lives. And, when it comes down to your own experiences, because you've got such a wide experience and so much behind you, which is great. And obviously you might have seen a wide extent of injuries and obviously, different factors which play into players that might, be highlighted at a younger age, which has prevented them from playing, or it might have been a hindrance, and or they've had something longer term which might affect them later on, or it hasn't been highlighted. But when it has come down to it, what has been the worst injury that you've personally seen?
I've seen some pretty nasty open fractures. They're never nice to see. They're really confronting for everyone involved. To be honest, they're actually not the ones that take the longest to recover for, but they're definitely worse at the beginning. And actually, I've worked in a few different sports, and I've worked in contact versus non-contact sports, and actually the injuries I've seen have actually all been on the football field in terms of open fractures. But seen maybe 3 or 4 open ankle dislocations and fractures, and they're never nice. You know what I mean? They're horrible for everyone involved. But I think probably what's the most confronting thing is until an ambulance gets there, it's a pretty tough time for everyone. But hopefully they don't continue to happen. If referees are pretty strict pretty early on in terms of tackles and studs up tackles and things, so they always happen in the exact same way. It's always a studs up tackle that probably shouldn't have happened.
And because of that, obviously, it can be quite difficult then, because you are supporting players when they are rehabilitating and they're on their way back, or they might be going through it, or they might pick up a knock and then they have to see you the next day, etc. But obviously, when it becomes the worst of the worst and you have to see that, it's quite traumatic in its own way to sort of think, right, sport can do this to people.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's kind of your worst fear to have to deal with that, and it's not for what you're about to see. It's how you're going to be able to support that athlete, and it can be important to also at those times try and find out what their network like. Do they have a support network? Because they're going to be really important. You're all going to have to work together, and again, knowing as much as you can about each athlete can help. Or that's when again rely on the captain. Speak to them. Do they have a support person? Who's going to go to the hospital with them? What's the next step? But it is full on for everyone. But when you have a close team, that can be really helpful as well, because then your support network can be the entire team. When it's slightly less competitive and everyone's always there for each other, that's helpful. And in terms of injuries, you normally see that. So normally, within these bigger squads, everyone's fighting for a spot, but anyone that's ever been injured before knows it's a bit of a dark time, and normally squads can be really good at coming together and being that support person.
And you do see it when you watch documentaries like on Amazon Prime, where you see All or Nothing, and one of the players gets out injured, and then the bad news is delivered, and it's sort of obviously dropped a bombshell in terms of how they thought the season was going to go out, or how that looks for them. And it's quite a tough time when the physio or that team has to deliver the news to them, and they're like, right, you're actually going to be out for say 6 months, 9 months, the season, and it can be quite a tough time for them to sort of endure, but also then to be on the flip side and deliver that message.
Yeah, it is hard, and I've done it in different ways. And what I've now learned is ask the athlete what they want, how they want to do it. Some athletes want to be the one to dress the team. Some athletes can't handle it. They want me to do it. They want the head coach to do it. But over my years, I've found ask them how they want it. Social media can also be a pretty tough time. If it's a high profile athlete, they can be pressured to feel like that they need to tell the world quickly. But again, just kind of being there, having those conversations and reassure them that, you don't need to make a decision today. The world doesn't need to know today. They don't need to know tomorrow. They can know next week. But leaving it in the athlete's hands can be helpful. And then I guess, as a physio, stepping up to help them when they can't do it. You know what I mean? That can be helpful for them. Sometimes, it can be done in a group setting or once. It can be, I've seen everything. I've seen, addressing teams in a meeting. I've seen, chucking in a text message in the group chat if athletes are finding it really hard to deal with. It can be one-on-one chats with me and everyone in the squad, or again, just, by the head coach can sometimes be easier as well. But then flip side, I've definitely seen athletes where they want to tell their squad, they feel like they need to be the person to do that. And if they're able to do it, then fantastic to support them through that.
It's great that we don't have to rush athletes into making that decision, because, we are in high performance worlds, or where we are pushing them out or pushing players to get back in quicker. It's when we're at the higher end in terms of high performance and working in elite environments, because you obviously have that involvement and have that experience of working in the elite environments, and it can be so different from a grassroots one. But what we do forget is it's difficult because players sort of become assets and they have to be back on the pitch, etc. And especially if a player only has a year contract, then it's like, right, they need to get back to fitness to get back to playing to try and secure another year, or they go out and then they got to try and find something. And obviously it's difficult then because they're trying to sustain a lifestyle as well as enjoy playing. But it can be difficult then. Because they're trying to rush back, and as we said way at the start, is this can hinder their actual progress when it comes to returning.
Yeah, and I think what I commonly see is players that have been injured before kind of understand that rushing back isn't the best answer. When players have not had a substantial injury before, they're normally the ones that you really need to rein in. You need to probably control things a little bit more, have conversations throughout the whole time about what worst case scenario is, what getting re-injured can do. And again, education, I think, comes down to it. I know I keep talking about it, but players understand things. Players are on board when they understand what the whys. And I think everyone just wants to know why. So, encourage them to always ask questions is super important. But I tend to see players that have had multiple injuries before. They will know what happens when it goes badly if they get rushed too soon. Players that this is their first injury will probably, it's their first time being injured, let alone getting re-injured. They're the ones you need to kind of slow down a little bit.
And that's great that we talk about, that process, that progress for players. And, there's so much in terms of it when, how you can approach players, support them, especially at all levels. And as I said, I was like a blank canvas when talking to you. And, I can't even go into like speciality or ask about something which, you might have the world of knowledge about, because I'm literally, as I keep saying, it's that blank canvas. And it's great to pull out little things because, I'm not a fitness coach and I've never gone on and delivered a bleep test, and it's something that my assistant coach said the other day, maybe we should consider it for pre-season. I said, that's great, but I don't really know what the outcome would be or what we're really looking for in terms of that. And we've had a couple of little niggly injuries in terms of our boys this year, but nothing that's kept them out for the year, or nothing that's really been a major concern for us at the moment. One of our players went to the doctors the other day. He's having some trouble in his legs. We're going to monitor that and how we sort of reintegrate the players back in. And the one thing that is a big consideration that I was going to say to you is, and we sort of have covered a bit of it, is working with 16 to 19s is quite difficult. When it comes back down to them, they got a lot of considerations and a lot to take away in terms of managing their own loads. So, for example, we have 16 to 19-year-olds at the minute. They'll train on a Monday evening with us at 19s. They'll train then on a Tuesday with the seniors, and then they'll train again on a Thursday with the seniors, and then they'll play 90 minutes on a Saturday, then they'll play 90 minutes for us. Now, just on a Saturday alone, that's 180 minutes worth of football, plus their warm-up beforehand. And then we see some of the players playing for us on a Sunday, and they're completely knackered from the game the day before because their legs just can't take it. And quite a lot of them have said, can you bring me off because my legs are literally knackered, tired. And it's quite a big load to sort of train, to play Saturday, Sunday, train Monday, Tuesday, break Wednesday, back to training Thursday for, a 16 to 19-year-old, because they are still growing and developing essentially.
Yeah, and I think that's where recovery is super important. And I think football is so renowned for it. Players don't know about recovery at all. And what they do know is probably the things they don't need to bother about. Compression and ice baths and things can be, I'm recovering. I'm doing what I need to do. But, they're things that are not really supported by research in terms of they can help in recovery. They're probably not doing the basics. You know what I mean? Like, if you're not thinking food, hydration, and sleep, then you're not recovering, and you're not doing what you need to recover. And especially with that age group where you do have the biggest training loads, especially, that game example that you've given, you probably need to ask the question, how many hours of sleep did you get the night before? How much have you eaten before the game? How much water have you had? And again, sometimes they can just either not know or they just don't prioritize it for them and understand how important it is. But, if you ask them if they've done the small things, have they jumped on a foam roller? Are they wearing skins? Oh, yeah, they've done all those, but they're not the important things. And I think sometimes we can be our own worst enemy in terms of multiple training sessions and like late finishes and early starts. And I think if you're going to have players that are having these typical weeks in your squad, you probably need to think about the timing of training a little bit more, especially towards the back end of the week, in terms of on a structure and a scheduling perspective. Are we the reason that they can't tick those boxes, or is it self-inflicted? Do they just want to be on their phones all night or watching Netflix or whatever? But maybe they just need the education to know, well, actually this is detrimental. Did you understand and did you know how important sleep is? Maybe if we tried to get 2 hours extra sleep each night, we might be able to play more on the weekend. So having those conversations can be helpful, but I'd probably be looking at recovery for these players.
And that's a great takeaway for them and something which they'll really listen to when I share it out with them. And, that's something that I'm quite big on because they are struggling essentially in terms of their own fitness without realising it. They're not really having those recoveries and they're not slowing down. And then when it comes to Sunday, they are lacking their real fitness and they're not getting to areas on the pitch which they should do because they're just struggling in terms of their fitness, even though they can actually get there if they hadn't played the Saturday before. And it's difficult then to watch them not be able to do something and then they get frustrated because they've overstretched themselves.
Yeah, that always tough to see. It might need conversations with the other coaches in terms of the game the day before, which obviously very hard, saying, can you not use my player for this amount of minutes? But, if it's having an ongoing effect, then those conversations probably need to be had. But, it may even be simple kind of tweaks in terms of, you're going to be doing these double games or double days on the weekend. You probably need to restrict their training for those players the days leading into those games. So that can be something that as a coach you can probably do, and it doesn't mean not do training, but just restrict their loads in certain drills. Just cut them short, 2 minutes less on each drill. Overall, they're going to be taking a big chunk out, and don't be afraid to think of, well, if they don't complete the drill, they won't be fit because they have a much bigger load than everyone else is going to have in the squad. So they're going to get their fitness in the games, but they probably just need to recover a bit better leading into those games.
And, there's so many key takeaways and it's great to sort of, look at a few things. I've been writing notes down as you've been chatting. There's been little things that I pulled off. And one last question before you go. I know that we're so big on terms of research right now and looking into different things. And I see a lot of things on social media. How many hours we should sleep, ways we should sleep, directions that we should sleep in the night, how we should do certain things. And obviously, there's more research going into it, a lot more studies, and the people got a lot more philosophies in terms of how they might think something goes. But is there an optimum time of the day where we should be looking at players training? So are they better off training in the morning? Or are they better off training in the afternoon or in the evening? It's just because also, there's those considerations that they are up late to sleep, how much have they eaten, i.e. if they go to school and then they're training in the night or been working, we have to take that into consideration. And if they are having full-time school or jobs, then obviously we have to train in the evening. But looking at it, as it's getting lighter now, and I'm thinking, all right, where are we going to continue training on a Monday, say 6:30 till 8, or are we going to go to a Wednesday and start earlier at say 5 to 6:30? Is there a sort of key consideration just on the fitness side, or in terms of the mindset, or any research that you've seen which says, right, it's actually better off to train typically at this time in a day?
It typically isn't the time of the day, but it's the time between sessions. So, if you're just doing night sessions, it's probably not a big issue, but I definitely seen lots of football teams where they do a night session and they want to do an extra one, so they do an early morning the next day. And it's just the biggest disaster, right? If you're not going to even have 10 hours between sessions, what sleep are these athletes going to get? So I think be careful if you're going to do a night and then a morning. That can be a bit of an issue. I think, if you're working in the age group where some people are going to work the next day as opposed to school, you probably just need to be mindful if that's a big number in your squad. Are they having an early start? Because it's really just hours between sessions that are important, and hours between work. How much sleep can they get before they need to get up the next day? So probably just knowing your squad. I think if you're working in that younger age group where you can just kind of expect that they just going to have to go to school, then the earlier the better. You know what I mean? There's definitely research in terms of deep sleep and light sleep, and we know that you need this deep sleep, but that can be really hard to get to if players don't have enough time to unwind to lead them to a better sleep. So if you're starting training as early as possible, if you're starting at 5:30 as opposed to 7:30, you're giving them time to do the things that they need to do to relax at the end of the day to ensure that they get the best sleep. So if you've got full say, I like to go a little bit earlier. It's normally less of an issue, finishing school or finishing work and going straight to training. As long as you get a little bit of food in there, you're normally okay. But I'd be focusing on getting as much sleep as you can between the sessions.
And that's great. And when it just comes down to it, then is there a typical time that you say is a great time to shut off at night before waking up?
I think everyone is different with that. I think, the research says 8 hours is probably the minimum you need to decrease injury risk. I think that 8 to 10 hour window for full-time athletes is pretty ideal, but there's definitely some players that I've worked with that say they're totally fine to get 7 hours and they're feeling fresh the next day. So I'd be saying more, that the hours of sleep is probably the best. If you look on a research perspective, eight is the key. Also, the younger your players are, the more sleep they need. So definitely, there's been studies out there that compares injury risk on sleep alone, and youth athletes that are getting 10 hours of sleep compared to 8. You're going to have a decreased injury risk having 10 hours of sleep when you look at nothing else. You're not even looking at training loads or injury history or anything. So we know that sleep is super important, but again, we can kind of be our own worst enemy if we're scheduling late training. But that gets hard in those grassroots levels in terms of, what fields are available, like what constraints do we have? But, everyone kind of needs to play their part in trying to help out the issue.
Absolutely, I completely agree, and it's great that you say about the considerations for grassroots coaches. Pitches available when they are training, and it's not perfect, as we keep saying. We don't have an abundance of resources, and we don't always have the availability of time or the opportunity to do things the way we'd always like to do them. So then it's how we sort of support those players, those question techniques, communications, having those always honest relationships, and certainly allowing players the platform when they can provide that feedback and be honest, because the players can hide about their injuries and what they don't want to be seen as a weakness, because they want to make sure that they're playing and make sure they're favoured by coaches, and it's quite difficult then because they're hiding that mental side of the game and they could be affecting an injury. So there's so much to really take away from it in terms of the mental side when we are considering physicality, even though we haven't gone through a full-on physical plan and program as such. It's great to sort of cover these bases, and especially in the terms of, back in my mind, the coaches who might have these considerations when working with players and how to support them. And this might be a consideration and a lot of key takeaways where they haven't thought about these components or haven't thought about how they could support players in terms of the athletic development on and off the field and what their players might be going through, why they might be performing. And it's just great for players to sort of hear different perspectives as well, especially from someone who's so big in terms of athletic development and that has that big background. But there's been so many things that I've taken away, and that has allowed me to sort of reflect already and start thinking and sort of relate different experiences as you've been speaking and ask certain questions. But there's so much in there, which, as I say, I'm going to have so many key takeaways, and I'm going to try and get some shorts on there because it's just been little things which I think are key just to share out, and it has been great. But I know we've arranged it over the last few weeks, and the time difference, I couldn't get my head around at first, but it's amazing that, we've been able to accommodate it a little bit later here at night and early in the morning, which I really, really do appreciate here. But I've really enjoyed having you on, and as I said, I've been that blank canvas, and I've not been able to sort of go in with a pitch, a question. I had some questions, but not to the full extent of having the knowledge of being like on the technical or tactical side of it compared to the SSC and physiotherapy in terms of that. But I've really appreciated it, and it's a big thank you from me, really.
Yeah, it's been a great chat. The more conversations, the better. As we've been talking about, sharing knowledge and things can only help to get great outcomes. So, thanks for inviting me on, and it's been great. I've learned lots, and it's always interesting to know, at those low levels, what you're struggling with and what you could get more advice on, and hopefully someone can take something out of it and learn something from it.
Absolutely, and it's been great, and I've just had an idea sparked in my mind about getting you on again and quizzing you on something in terms of another episode, but I'll drop you a message about that. But I hope you have a fantastic weekend and hopefully have that time to relax and sort of do whatever S&C and physiotherapy coaches do away from the game in their spare time. But it's been great.
Yeah, you too. Enjoy your leave.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Roll on this time next week.
Perfect.
Well, thank you very much.
Pleasure. All right, have a good one.
And you. Thank you.
Thanks.